So I want to say warm welcome to our New York State Commissioner of OCFS, which is the Office of Children and Family Services, Mrs. Sheila Poole. We are so grateful and delighted that you have selected the Westchester County Youth Bureau to make this presentation. We have convened a number of community stakeholders who share an interest in, making sure that our young people are safe, making sure that we are addressing the complex needs of New Yorkers and specifically children, youth, and families. This collaboration between the Westchester County government as well as New York State government, as well as our nonprofits and youth service providers that are here today, truly understand that there is alignment of standards and intentions across all stakeholder groups, and that our children, youth, and families deserve the very best. And so we want to address the challenges that obviously interfere with their quality of life. And in order to do that, we have to have a budget. So today's audience is very diverse. It's inclusive of many stakeholders that range from, hospital administrators to educators, government officials, and business owners. But the majority of today's audience, you should know, are those that are working in the trenches and running organizations such as nonprofits and youth bureaus that are concerned mostly with child welfare, positive youth development, as well as criminal justice services, and all the things that we know prevent our young people from entering systems or furthering into systems, albeit juvenile justice, educational, a bit, having abysmal educational outcomes. We want to really prevent those things from happening for our young people. And obviously, we have mental health experts in the room because they understand that we must work collaboratively to stem some of the complex challenges that our children, youth, and families face. So I want to just take the time to thank our elected officials that are present. I can't see everyone from my screen, but I will say that I know we have a few legislators on the line, along with my colleagues. You mentioned John Beefus, who's an amazing first deputy commissioner of the Department of Social Services, along with Leonard Towns, the commissioner of Social Services, a number of other commissioners, directors, but also leaders in the educational, nonprofit, and faith-based space. So I would also be remiss if I did not mention my colleagues in the Youth Bureau system. The New York State Association of Youth Bureaus have worked very hard and, deploy the resources made possible by your organization into the community. So while this targeted group is diverse, we expect to hear a little more than, what I just mentioned, the youth development updates. We also understand that you will allow for information concerning a wide variety of things, to include agriculture and infrastructure, to housing and juvenile justice and mental health services. I was thrilled when I saw some of the elements in your presentation because I think it's very well rounded. So at this time, because our county executive is not with us, I'm going to defer his introduction if you don't mind. I know that he's on a busy schedule, but wanted to be in attendance today. And we are a little technically challenged. As you can see, it's just Susan and I, and we're trying to navigate. So I thank you for your patience. I thank everyone in the audience for their patience. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our partner, New York State Office of Children and Family Services Commissioner, Mrs. Sheila Poole.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Harris Madden, for that lovely introduction. And I am delighted to be with all of you on this very, very warm, beautiful spring day. I hope the weather is the same down the river in Westchester County, but delighted to be with all of you today. And obviously many of you who I have had the privilege of working with as partners across these sectors for many years now, in both my former role in county government and now here at OCFS. So as Dr. Harris Madden indicated, today I will be walking through a representation of the governor's enacted state budget for New York. So it will cut across many sectors, but certainly happy, if time permits at the end, to address any children, youth, or family specific questions as time allows. So let's go ahead and get started. So our governor is obviously incredibly excited about her time as New York's first governor, as she has said from the first day of taking office. From her perspective, this represents a new era for New York. And this budget process, right, was meant to be very collaborative, including members of her administration, obviously the legislature, and many other important stakeholders. So we have now an enacted $221 billion budget that will make historic investments in the difference of people's lives, both now and for years to come, at both the state and local level. The enacted budget, as the governor has been consistently emphasizing, balances, right, the scales of being both socially responsible, because as you all know, as do I, there are so many incredibly pressing social challenges facing our children, youth, families, and communities across the state. But we also need to balance that with being fiscally prudent, right? Making sure that what is in the enacted budget today is something we can afford tomorrow, that it sets appropriate out-year budget obligations without overcommitting the state to, potentially create cliffs, right, for programs and services, which none of us want to do. So this budget really does a great job in striking that balance. The budget contains an overall $1.2 billion tax cut, and that represents an acceleration. So there had been plans to sort of scale this out over 2 or 3 budget years, but because of the economic pressures that we're all feeling, gas prices, milk prices, right, the inflation, the enacted budget does bring that tax benefit to New Yorkers this year. So there's an acceleration of that. And over $500 million Hudson Valley taxpayers will receive more money in their pockets this year, to the tune of $6.1 million in the Hudson Valley region. So this will result in an average $1,300 homeowner rebate credit. And again, providing that relief to an almost 400,000 Hudson Valley property tax paying household. So tax relief is on the way. There's an additional $585 million in tax relief for families and businesses, and I'll go into a little bit more depth here. So there's $250 million set aside specifically to help small businesses offset COVID-related expenses, right? So you all know during the pandemic, our small businesses were obviously among the hardest hit industries in our sector, yet we count on them in our communities and neighborhoods to support our kids and families. So there's an up to $250 in additional relief to those small businesses to allow them to make investments or to receive reimbursement in things. For example, capital investments they made to expand spaces to accommodate outdoor expansions, new machinery, equipment, all of those things they needed to do. And the budget also contains and creates expanded tax credit for New York's farmers, as well as continues the small business tax relief as well. So a lot of good news there in providing tax relief. And for some reason, I can't advance my slide. Let's try another way. Okay, we'll just do whatever we have to do to make this work, right? So let's turn for a moment to investments in education. So the budget contains the highest level of state aid ever, funded to the tune of $31.5 billion. And for the Hudson Valley region, that represents a $358 million investment, and that represents a 13% increase in aid to the region. And again, another big number here, $267 million, representing a 15% increase in foundation aid to the local schools. So great continuing investments. For those of you who are here, the governor knows she spends a lot of time talking about investments, not only certainly in the earliest parts of education, which, right, are early care and child care, but all the way through our college system, which we'll talk about in a moment. In addition, there's $125 million in additional funding. So as you all know, for the past number of years, we have been expanding out pre-K 4 and then pre-K 3-year-olds. We had additional $125 million, and that will add on 17,500 new pre-K slots statewide. We're dedicating an additional $531 million for SUNY and CUNY operations, and I'll just lift up a couple of specific bullets. What's contained in that over $500 million investment. So there's $106 million to hire more full-time faculty. There's $100+ million to accommodate fringe benefit growth. There's $68 million in one-time debt relief for SUNY hospitals. There is $16 million for opportunity programs, specialized programming for students. There is almost $16 million in startup funding for campus-based childcare centers, which is so integral to students, supporting students who are also parents. And then SUNY and CUNY capital project investments include $1.2 billion for their state-operated campuses. So lots of new investments in our system. Also, $150 million investment to expand the TAP, Tuition Assistance Program, benefiting 75,000 students. That program, TAP, will also be made available to individuals in prison as part of our Jails to Jobs initiative. So great news there. Close to my heart, an interest is a $7 billion multi-year investment in child care, which all of you being in our human services sector, and many of you know that this is an issue of national policy importance, and our governor has been a huge supporter of child care. So we will this year, and of course, as most of you, I suppose, know that this is one of the bodies of work that I'm responsible as commissioner for implementing across the state. So this year, very soon, in fact, on June 1st, we will be raising our market rates from the 69th percentile to the 80th percentile. And then in August, effective August 1st of this year, we'll be raising subsidy eligibility for working parents from 200% to 300% of the federal poverty level. So Commissioner Towns and Beavis are very busy on the local level, getting ready to make all that happen for our working families. And we will also soon here at OCFS be issuing an additional round of child care stabilization grants, which were incredibly popular in the $1 billion round we put out last year in 2021. The budget includes $450 million funding to continue revitalizing our downtowns across the state. And housing, right? Especially in a county like Westchester and counties downstate where housing capacity and access and affordability are huge issues. There is a $25 billion 5-year housing plan to help ensure all New Yorkers have a roof over their heads. So that 5-year housing plan includes the creation and preservation of 100,000 affordable homes, including a set aside of 10,000 of those homes with supportive services for our vulnerable populations across the state. So really great news on housing support and capacity building. Governor, and we all, right, each and every day, especially many of you working in local government and in not-for-profits, but really in every sector, we're all experiencing an unforeseen, in many ways, post-pandemic, if we can say we're post-pandemic. I know it's not feeling that way quite yet, but really just we need such investment in workforce development, right? We know the statistics on our healthcare system. We know the statistics and the pipeline, or the lack of a pipeline, of new teachers coming into our colleges and universities. And so our governor's really talked a lot about workforce development strategies. We also want to keep New Yorkers in New York working, seeing career paths. We know some of the best anti-poverty and economic mobility strategies for our kids and youth and families are about not just a job, but about a well-paying job with good benefits, right? And a vision for a career here. So a huge $350 million investment for a whole variety of workforce initiatives. You probably saw the governor's press release. I think it was just a little over a week ago, where she announced the creation of a new state office of workforce strategies. They are now, just so you are all aware, partnering with the Business Council of New York on a survey for employers. So those of you who are employers, I heard you, Dr. Madden, say that there were a number of hospital administrators. There's a survey out there now to tell the state's new Office of Workforce and Strategic Initiatives what are the gaps in the skill sets for the workforce. So I encourage all of you to take advantage of that opportunity. There is $200 million supporting a variety of strategies to bring businesses to New York State, which we know is really important to our economic stability in the long haul. The enacted budget creates just an amazing, I think, set of initiatives to finally get serious about combating the effects of climate change. So there's a $4.2 billion program to support clean water, clean air, and green jobs. So that also the green jobs, the number of jobs, I think it's 200,000 jobs are projected to be created as a result of this $4.2 billion investment in the environment in New York State. And I just wanted to lift up for you living in the Mid-Hudson region, just some of these environmental investments that you're going to benefit from specifically. So there's a Bear Mountain, Great Lawn and Picnics Grounds transformation. There is the Sojourner Truth Development Plan, the Olana Visitor Center. I love Olana. I've spent some time there this spring. And then the Harriman Park Children Group Camp Revitalization. I was there last summer. Camp Junior and others, they just do an amazing job giving young people a chance to be out in nature and learning new skills. So there's some additional great projects that our DEC agency will be doing for waterways and parkways. So a lot of great investments. You've also heard and seen some of the offshore wind and clean air investments. So this is New York's moment, right, to really be making sure that we keep our state beautiful for the future. So our Department of Transportation has a massive $32.8 billion infrastructure plan. You've heard, right, you've heard in the news some of the, the sort of clips about the Pave Our Potholes campaign, and just making sure that our bridges, that our highways, our streets, our walkways connecting neighborhoods and communities, that we are finally making that investment given so many years of disrepair and disinvestment. So this represents an over 40% increase over the prior 5-year plan, making sure we can get people to where they need to be. The budget, enacted budget, represents the largest investment in healthcare in state history. Overall $20 billion investment, including $1.2 billion in bonuses for our frontline healthcare workers, and a $7.7 billion investment to raise the home care worker wages. So again, right, I don't need to tell any of you, our lack of investments over time were really laid bare during the pandemic. And so this is a massive infusion of investment into our really critical healthcare system in New York. And there's an additional $2.4 billion for other healthcare infrastructure supports. And in the Mid-Hudson, Hudson Valley region, there's a $47 million investment to support addiction treatment recovery, which we all know, right? The decimation that the pandemic has exacerbated. So that $47 million that will be invested in the Mid-Hudson region will support a myriad of programs: opioid treatment, crisis stabilization beds, a youth clubhouse, jail-based treatment, permanent supporting housing, and 2 state-operated addiction treatment centers. In addition, I did want to mention that there is an almost $2 million investment in a veteran peer-to-peer services program to honor a veteran who committed suicide. So again, making that investment specifically to recognize our veterans and the many needs that they have. So there's a $50 million investment to meet the needs of communities most impacted by gun violence. And I know that you all are feeling that very much in your community. In Yonkers and in other places in Westchester County have been particularly hard hit. So again, I'm not going to read off all of these, but again, there's been a lot of focus on doing whatever we can, particularly cracking down on gun trafficking, the ghost guns that have found their way into the hands of very young people in our communities, investing in mental health, which we know, the effects. Every day we're reading an article, a research article about just how deep and wide the impacts on mental health have been. So a bit more specifically about the investments in gun violence prevention and violence interruption programs. So there's $13.1 million to expand the use of community stabilization units. There's a significant investment in gun violence intelligence, along with the expansion of SNUG, which for those of you who don't know is guns spelled backwards, so a evidence-based outreach program. And then there's an additional $20 million to allow regional plans to be developed as communities do know best on how to address these issues. So a lot of needed investments. Whoops, I think I went too fast. Hopefully I can go back. So, just in closing, just to sort of recap the highlights of this $221 billion investment. It's rebuilding our healthcare, our teachers, tax relief for struggling low and middle class families, speeding up our economic growth, creating good paying jobs, supporting our infrastructure, confronting climate change, public safety, homelessness, affordable housing, confronting the opioid epidemic, which continues to ravage our kids and families and communities, and then, of course, restoring trust in state government. So our governor and our legislature, I think, are committed and unified in this enacted budget, right, that we are intent on not just recovering from the pandemic, but emerging as New Yorkers, right? As is part of our culture and history as a state, stronger than ever before. So I will, we've got some time left. I'd be happy to take some questions and do my very best. I can't promise I will know the answer to every question in a $221 billion budget, and I'm not a subject matter expert, obviously, in everything, but I'd love to hear any comments or additional questions that folks may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Commissioner Poole. We really appreciate the very broad strokes, but it is historic, these investments that are being made community-wide. And I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge that we do have members of the Hudson Valley region, as well as different parts of New York State. My colleagues from the New York State Youth Bureau Association some of them are here too. So this applies across the board. And we know that each geographical area, may have some diversity in terms of the issues. But at the end of the day, many of us are concerned about the workforce development piece. So I'm going to start there because, historically, youth participation rates have been low for a number of reasons. And over the last couple decades, we've seen this like downward trend, and also now exacerbated by the devastation of COVID-19. We know that young people are challenged to find employment, particularly the older youth population. Those of us who spend time within that space understand that the major culprits include the lack of skills, but also the perceptions of employers. So I'm hoping that, the money that's being invested in some of these businesses have an attachment to hiring youth, because some of the questions and concerns that have come up have been that there is an appreciation for training and education, yet there is this lack of connectivity to actual employers and retention. So we know that, young people can have OSHA training, and as a matter of fact, we were at one of the governor's events, and, in a breakout session, the discussion was, we appreciate the training, but we are now moved beyond the training. And so I'd like to know, as well as some of my colleagues, are there plans to, help in terms of developing that social capital that will allow young people to enter the workplace and stay there? And moreover, looking at the gun violence prevention strategies, which must include employment and training. How can we get more young people and, connected to those businesses, since the governor has placed, a huge investment into, supporting those businesses?
Great question. So what I can tell you is that I have reached out to my counterparts, Commissioner Reardon at the Department of Labor, as well as the commissioners of DEC, right? We have $4 billion in a climate investment and almost 200,000 jobs that will be created in really new, high-tech, exciting industries, as well as NYSERDA on the energy side. So I said to them, how can we at OCFS, right, for our youth in communities who are looking for jobs, for youth leaving the juvenile justice facilities, whether they're in local community-based facilities or leaving the state facilities that I operate, we have got to be strategic in making sure in our new Office of Workforce Development that the young people, right, the folks where we're doing interventions on gun violence, are the young people who still, they have talents, they have abilities, they're incredibly smart young people. And we need, and many of them, at least, from running the state's deep end juvenile justice programs, when I talk to young people in my facilities, many of them have been so educationally disadvantaged, right? They've sort of given up hope. But these are kind of jobs that don't require, right, a 4-year degree. These are jobs that can be, highly skilled, but they can get credentials. The state should be standing up specialized training programs in partnerships with community colleges and other training partners. So those are the conversations that we at OCFS are after with our state agency partners, because it really takes, in those connections, they sound easy, but as we all know, they're very hard to make happen. And certainly statewide. But I do want to assure all of you as we look across the budget and we see these huge investments, I'm calling upon all my sister and brother, state agency commissioners to say, we have young people with skills and abilities and talents that we need to include in pipelines for all these additional investments. So, there are meetings and conversations going on. We had a WebEx with DEC a few weeks ago. So more to come on that. But again, if there are, and of course, the Department of Labor, I'm sure you're all very well aware, have their local career centers sprinkled widely across the state. Those are also great places for youth bureaus to make really strategic connections with and form relationships with, because those are the places where the Department of Labor, uses as their front door. But there's more work to be done, and we are diving deeply into that, particularly on jobs and workforce for young people.
Thank you so much for that. You're absolutely right. Anything that we can do to increase access for young people within high growth industries, unionized professions
Absolutely.
would go a long way.
Apprenticeships. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So we do have a couple questions also in the chat. And one is coming from Michael Goldstein, who's asking what funds are available for foster youth that age out of care.
Okay. So there are within existing local departments of social services. So there's Chafee funding that's available for local districts to use to support young people in care. So your colleagues at the county will be able to assist in terms of how Westchester County uses their Chafee allocation in supporting young people in care. There are pots of money in the state education department's budget that we actually administer here, the Fostering Youth Success Initiative, and those are dollars set aside to intentionally support young people in care or who've left care who are wanting to attend college. So there are investments to support them there. We also have at OCFS, we received, I think it was about $9 million of federal pandemic money related to Chafee. So we stood up a portal, an online portal, where young people who have left care can go in and very easily apply to receive an allocation of pandemic funding. I think we've provided that to over 1,400 young people. There is still money in that portal, so happy to get some more information on that. We do have to spend that money by September, but we were able to give out pretty sizable grant awards that young people who've left care, to pay for their car repairs, right, to pay for school books. We're doing a follow-up survey with those youth so we can really better understand. So what are the kinds of things they use their cash grant for? And that money, we wanted to make it really simple and accessible. So they were able to choose for it to be Venmo'd or direct deposited in their account. So yeah, so there are a variety, there's never enough funds, right? And we certainly have more to do there, but those are the main funding pots that come to mind right now.
Thank you. And we know, some of our foster care young people or those who have aged out have gone on to college
Oh,
and are living
yes.
independently, and this really does assist. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
We also have a question from Cheryl Brannon, who has said this was a wonderful presentation, and she asked, will there be resources allocated to speed up the processing of contracts within OCFS?
That's a great question, Cheryl. Thank you for that. So yes, and it's not, I'll be honest, we don't need more resources. We need a reorientation of how we engage with vendors. We process we process thousands and thousands of contracts here, and we are government, right? And so we have a lot of external control agencies who require all kinds of things in contracting. But the truth is, our mission is also to support not-for-profits. And our job is to make this much easier than it is. So I have a new executive deputy commissioner here at OCFS, and the first project I gave her was to really dive into our contracting process. And so very soon, and we actually had an engagement, some of you may have participated last year, we actually did focus groups with our vendors, and we got some really honest feedback about, what's helpful, what's not helpful. So we are going to be making a number of changes to our contracting process. We are also putting a lot more emphasis on human technical assistance. There's a lot of churn in our not-for-profit workforce, right? So someone who was a contract manager last year, for your after-school program, just as an example, may not be the same person, and they may be new to government, and it is incredibly complex to do. So Cheryl and others who are our not-for-profit partners, I wish you could sort of have a glimpse of me here in the office at OCFS, because day in and day out, we are pressing after, we've got to make this easier. We've got to make this, more plain language. And we've got to remove, minutia of contracting wherever we can. So hopefully in the next couple of months, you will be pleased to hear some of the changes we're about to make at OCFS.
Thank you for that. Diane Rosenthal has asked, what investments are being made to support the training of young people with disabilities who are transitioning from high school and into the workforce, post-secondary education? And then we have another question that relates to child welfare that I'll get to once you answer that.
Yeah, I don't honestly know the answer to the question about the training for young people. Can you repeat it again, Dr. Harris, just so I can take it down and we'll get an
Sure.
answer?
Yes. What investments are being made to support the training of young people with disabilities who are transitioning from high school and into the workforce?
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that, but I do have some really good news. And the governor has hired, I think it's for the first time, and I've been in state government for many years now, a state disability officer. Her name is Kimberly Hill, and she is formidable and she's amazing. She is holding all state agencies accountable about making sure whatever we're doing includes, right, individuals with disabilities, and that we are laser focused on doing a better job, frankly, as government agencies and partners in serving the disability community. So she's just a few months on the job, but I expect great things to be happening in her office. So I did just want to mention that, but we'll bring that question back and try and get a better answer for you. What was
Thank
the
you.
child welfare question?
Sure. So, Michelle is wondering if the Family First Prevention Plan has been approved, and are there any funding for community providers to cover costs associated with evidence-based programs?
Great question.
Love that question.
So, Michelle, our Family First Prevention Plan has gone through its first review with our federal partners. We got very, very, very positive feedback. They asked just very few questions, considering they are the feds and they like to ask us lots of questions typically. And so we just this week sent our agency's response back on those questions. So we should be able to, proceed very soon. And we're super excited about the vision in our prevention plan. And yes, to your question about are there funds available to support the implementation and rollout of new evidence-based prevention models. So that we have a $20 million federal Family First Transition Fund that states were given to do exactly that, to help seed and grow and make sure there is good fidelity to the new evidence-based models that we as the state will be working on. We've had, since Family First was passed in 2018, we have a statewide implementation team. So it's a very representative group of about 40 local district representatives, our voluntary agencies, and other not-for-profits and associations who are helping guide the state in implementing, figuring out what of the models available in the clearinghouse are the ones that can really help us in New York, solve, right, some of our child welfare issues that our data tells us need additional investment. So lots more to come on our prevention work. But yes, there is money to support implementation at the local level.
Thank you. I'm trying to keep up with the questions. I know that there's one from our administrator of the Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center here. I'm trying to find that. But in the meantime, there's just a follow-up question regarding the workforce development supports. Joanne Dunn from our wonderful youth shelter of Westchester, who has been a huge partner on the gun violence prevention initiatives, has asked what supports are OCFS putting in place to examine the emerging adults, young people ages 18 to 24, and how are we making sure there is a true cross systems collaboration at the state level?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we spend a lot of time working with our partners in youth justice at the Division of Criminal Justice Services, so DCJS, on just all of that. And we also, I don't know if you have, made connections with an investment that both OCFS and DCJS made several years ago with standing up the Youth Justice Institute. Giza Lopez heads up that institute, which is out of the School of Criminal Justice at SUNY Albany. So there, there's lots of investments in the, the regional groups. I can't remember, the regional youth justice teams, I think is the acronym that we're using. So there's lots of strategies and discussions underway. I think there've been a lot of investments in allowing localities to say to the state, DCJS through the JJAC funding, here's some models we'd like to pilot and to test out. So there's always that option available. I hope Dr. Nina Aladort, who's our Deputy Commissioner here for Youth Development and Partnerships for Success. So we are always trying to find ways of bringing resources, and of course last year with the first round of gun violence money, right, turning to the youth bureaus to be a main partner in getting those, and to the hyper-local not-for-profits, right, who know best. So I think those are some examples, but yeah, lots of work, lots of, I think, recognition that the best work in youth development, the best work on community capacity building, the best work on strategies to keep young people really engaged have to happen at the community level. And you folks, you know how to do that best. DCJS will be pushing out a lot of money this year on gun violence strategy. So you should all be carefully watching for their funding announcements. There will be some really important opportunities for you.
Yes, and we plan on it, and a number of us serve on your regional youth justice teams. I also serve on PYJ. I mean, we're kind of all over to support these aims. I want to just say before Susan starts to ask a few questions that she's received, and I'm cognizant of time. On behalf of Jackie Negri, she wanted to just say thank you for your ongoing support and recognition of youth bureaus as a community leader, to include the new youth sports and education funding.
The 5 million.
Yes. And so since she's brought that up, I'd like to just ask if you might just speak very briefly to that initiative and what we might look forward to.
Yeah. So this is great, right? So it was originally $1 million, but much to our pleasant surprise, there's $5 million, dollars in the enacted budget. So again, it's, it's not billions, but it's 5 million, right? Which is is good money, and you can do a lot of low cost, impactful things. So again, Dr. Alador and her team plan to be sending that out through the youth bureaus and making sure that those dollars really get to the kinds of services and programs that young people actually find attractive and appealing. And so hopefully you'll be hearing from us very soon. We want to get that money out the door. So thanks for reminding me about that 5 million.
Sure. Yes, and we do work closely with her. I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Hi, Commissioner. So from Judith Watson of the Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center, there is a question. Could you please elaborate on the 1.2 billion for frontline healthcare workers? Will discretion be given to the organizations regarding distribution?
Okay, let me go find my slide on that. That may be one that we'll take back and make sure we're getting precise information. The last thing I ever want to do is not, let's see. So the slide, so there's an overall $20 billion investment, including $1.2 billion in bonuses for frontline healthcare workers. So that $1.2 billion, as I understand it, will be a one-time bonus. That is derived from federal pandemic money. I believe that's a great way to spend it and get a bonus in the hands of many, many frontline healthcare workers. And then there's an additional $7.7 billion to raise home care worker wages. So I don't know if that answers her question specifically, but if not, we can take it back to our health team, to the Department of Health, and get a fuller answer for you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Susan, you said that our association president, Mr. Frank Williams, had a question as well.
Yes. Any thoughts about the issue of mental health across all sectors? We had a town meeting recently and it was noted that we are in crisis.
Yes. It is, I don't know what the adjective, it's breathtaking. I think the depth and scale of what we're seeing, and my fear, just among friends, and not to be overly dramatic, but I think we're just actually beginning to see, the complete manifestation and the damage, that has been done to folks. And as, you all are employers, I'm sure, like me, you are also seeing it in your own employees, just everyone. I don't think there is a person who can honestly say, that we've not been impacted in some way. So that's sort of the acknowledgement in my perspective on just how serious it is. There was just another study out yesterday about, suicidality among, young people, and of course among Black and Latino youth. It is so overwhelming, to begin to think about how do we get ahead of this. I will say, Dr. Ann Sullivan, of course, our great commissioner from the Office of Mental Health, they are pushing out many, many new initiatives, just today, I think that they announced the 1-888 crisis hotline. So I'm sure you'll be hearing about that from your county. I know Westchester's always had a fantastic local mental health department. OMH is also pushing out youth assertive treatment teams across the state, mobile crisis teams. So again, I think that there is recognition that we need to do much, much more. Our schools, of course, are a place that we're also seeing many, many behavioral issues, We're all reading about that in incidents. And I know that there are investments in school settings as well. So it's whatever touch point we have, within our resources. And of course, the workforce crisis makes all of this more challenging, is trying to find enough clinicians and therapists while we have these new dollars to really meet the need. But I think we also learned, the benefits of telehealth, and folks who would have never walked into a clinician's office or a therapist's office willing to get online, and how many folks we were able to meet and respond to in that way. So yes, the mental health impacts are overwhelming. But I admire the work that Dr. Sullivan, I know her team is working around the clock, to do whatever they can to get the money out the door and get some of these services stood up. There's Project Hope, that has been up and running, of course, throughout the pandemic. So, but yes, it's incredibly, it's overwhelming to really see it, right? The impact that it's had, obviously, in our role in child welfare and child protective services. We see it each and every day too. So, any other ideas that you have? I actually think mental health needs to be infused, in every service provision that you're doing, right? If you get when you get your allocation for the youth, the 5 million youth dollars, when the gun violence money comes down, there needs to be a mental health and a trauma responsive component to everything that we're doing, because it's there on every level.
Oh, absolutely. And, Westchester, we are always keeping our fingers on the pulse of these
Yes,
things.
you guys do a great
And
job.
with that said, we do have George with us, and I just wanted to note that here in Westchester County, we just had a press conference announcing our new children's cabinet, which is a collaborative effort between the Youth Bureau, our wonderful Commissioner of Mental Health Services, Department of Community Mental Health, and John, your friend,
Oh, that's
with
great.
DSS. So we're looking at behavioral health, and we understand how the intersectionality really exists, and that this is not just about the social health determinants, yet the social health mental determinants.
Yeah.
So with that said, I wanted to just
Great.
allow George to provide some closing remarks and thank those who have helped us to have an engaging dialogue and asking questions. But we're going to keep mindful of the time, and I can't think of a better person to close us out than our county executive, Mr. George Latimer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Damia, and I want to thank the commissioner for a really excellent presentation. I managed to sit through all of it from just right after the very beginning of it, and it was very thorough, and it really did outline the budget priorities. We're very grateful that this governor and the legislature has put significant money aside. We're very fortunate. We've got a great group of professionals, such as those who are on this Zoom, on this WebEx, I should say, and when given the right resources from us in county management or from the state, they do wonderful things in reaching out to our community. So we're appreciative, Commissioner, of the work that the state has done. We will try to be, always there to implement these initiatives. We've been trying to do that over an extended period of time. Westchester has a reputation of trying to be the good child. We try to take to heart the mission. But when you have Damia Harris-Madden and Michael Orth and people of that quality on the team, I just kind of sit there and smile and let them do their thing and appreciate the great output that comes out of it. So,
yeah, you are very fortunate, County Executive Latimer. You have a fantastic team, and it takes everyone, right, being together as equal partners, and you are very fortunate in that regard.
I do appreciate it. I keep them in my prayers every night when I'm on my knees at the end of the night. Thank you for my executive team. And thank you again for the presentation today.
My pleasure. It's been great to be with all of you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. I think that, we had up to 100 attendees at a certain point. So I think that this message has been well received. We will also make this available on our website once we do a little cleanup, and we'll absolutely share with you and your team, who we really appreciate. I'd like to, again, thank George for making the time to sit through and wait patiently to the end to make comments. And Commissioner, we feel very fortunate that you chose Westchester to bring this budget presentation to us. You could have chosen other places. You chose us, and I know you'll be making your rounds. So we're just happy to be a part of this. I think that my colleagues, I can speak for many of my colleagues that we are very excited about these investments, and we hope to put these dollars to judicious use. Clearly, we want to be able to access these dollars, and our team of experts that are really working on the front lines were invited because we wanted to make sure that it just wasn't at an executive level, and that they could hear firsthand about these investments. So thank you again for taking this time. And with that said, unless you have any other remarks, I want to close out
No,
on a great note.
No, thank you for having me, and keep doing great work in the county.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you to everyone. Be well.
Bye-bye.